Good morning. Welcome back to the Tuscany Lightning Summit 2024. You survived day one. I'm very happy to see that. So this morning we have a couple of super interesting panels, but before we dig into very intellectual stuff, I need a favor from you, please. Take your smartphone, Telegram on the Tuscany Lightning Summit group. You're gonna find the link to the live stream. Please share it on your social media. Let the world know that there is this beautiful event here. Thank you so much. Okay, so yesterday was a super interesting day. We discussed about Lightning Network today, how to onboard merchants, how to make Lightning wallets more performant, more intuitive, so how to keep scaling the Lightning Network. This morning we have a program of panels, and the first one is one for the ages. We're gonna discuss about the state of the technology as it is today. So please welcome for the State of the Lightning panel, Roy Seinfeld, Ryan Gentry, Steve Lee, John Carvalho, and Bastien Tuntier. Please. You have 3 mics, guys, so be good. Like brothers, you share them.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Thank you so much for coming to the second Lightning Summit. Thank you, Philly, for organizing everything. Thanks, Fulgur, Oleg, Vitalik. I don't see Oleg here. Oleg had a birthday yesterday, so happy birthday if you hear us. So unlike other panels, I'm actually excited about this one. I see John too. John and I meet only on Lightning panels, so. And typically it's very boring, but I think this one's going to be interesting because I'm actually interested in this discussion. I think I've met most of you in the first Lightning conference in Berlin, right? 2019. Steve, you were there? No, but you started Spiral in 2019. So I think we're all kind of Lightning veterans, at least 5 years in Lightning. So maybe my first question is, in Berlin 2019, Ryan, you were still with Multicoin before joining Lightning Lab. John, you were with Bitrefill, if I remember correctly, before you started your own Lightning journey. Bastien, you're a software developer in Async, but now you're the CTO. So we were all made a lot of progress in our Lightning journey. Did you expect to be where we are now, 5 years in?
I definitely expected the type of growth and progress that we've seen in terms of the network getting bigger, network getting more performant, having, like with the news yesterday that Coinbase is joining with Lightspark, right? That was kind of, I remember at the time, especially from kind of the crypto point of view, the big mindset was everybody's like, oh, well, Lightning's never going to take off until all the exchanges are on board, right? I remember that very clearly as being kind of a refrain that kept being said. So I think in that terms, yeah, right? Like, ideally it would have happened sooner than that. But I do think that it has progressed very nicely and that we've grown quite a bit and the network has definitely improved and gotten to a much more usable state. What I will say is that I didn't quite expect or see coming. I thought there would be a lot more of the like micropayments on the internet type stuff and a lot more of the instant payments, peer-to-peer stuff, a lot more of the kind of net brand new use cases, streaming money type things. That's what I remember being really excited about at the time. And while, I think it's kind of not bad, and maybe I was just wrong about kind of like where Lightning was gonna take off to begin with, I think kind of the cross-border remittances, normal kind of everyday payments, and then kind of like financial use cases for just moving money around that seems like kind of the dominant use case for Lightning today. Just kind of, that wasn't what I expected. So it has grown maybe about like I expected, but for all of the different reasons.
Yeah. I share that same sentiment. I'd say that 4 or 5 years ago, I expected, or at the time I knew Lightning was complicated. What I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years is that it's even more complicated than I thought at the time, and I suspect everyone here would feel the same way. So it's very complicated. I also would say that progress has been very meaningful, but slower than expected. Whether it be from like the LDK project perspective or Lightning overall. And I'm not a developer, I'm the like PM type person, so I of course, always would like to see it faster, but the good news is that the progress is up and to the right. I mean, we're not like going backwards. Like Lightning today is absolutely better than the year before and the year before that. And the roadmap ahead is, there's a lot of clarity in terms of a lot of the known remaining challenges of Lightning. There are known fixes, and it's just a matter of time. I think there's also some fundamental challenges of Lightning that we should talk about in this panel as well, which are either unsolvable because they're fundamental to Lightning, or the solutions are uncertain. So I think that would be worth talking about.
And specifically about the use cases, did you expect the use cases that we see right now, did you expect them to kind of take the lead?
I didn't, yeah. I've always been, had belief and optimistic about use cases, but uncertain on timing. So I guess I've not been disappointed with that. I actually think like Stacker News as an application is quite compelling. It's my favorite Bitcoin app. I mean, beyond just like a wallet and saving and hodling, Stacker News is my favorite application to use. I think it could become like a Reddit killer, and a key reason why is because of Bitcoin. So that remains to be seen. But if it does, that would be amazing. And of course, Nostr and using Zaps, while that's niche on global scale, it does have good engagement on like a per user basis. So that's nice to see as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it feels like in 2019 in Berlin, it was really a lot of excitement, like startup-like excitement, where everything was brewing, and usually in that kind of projects, you expect either exponential growth or just disappearing after a few years. And what's interesting is that I think at least we've always thought ourselves that this was never what was going to happen with Lightning. And since then, we've only seen basically linear growth. And most people are not okay with that. They say, oh, but where is hyper-Bitcoinization? Where is exponential growth? And I don't think that's the way for Bitcoin. And I think that linear growth that we've been seeing is really nice. And it means we start reaching people who are not Bitcoin experts. At that time in 2019, I feel it was really the point where Lightning started becoming usable for the first time, but usable for people who understood Bitcoin and who understood the basics of Lightning. It was then that we introduced the first version of Phoenix. I remember that we were in the hotel before the conference, finishing it and trying to create GIFs to advertise it on Twitter. And it really felt like that was, for us at least, the first step towards making Lightning usable for people who didn't have to understand a lot of technical details. But even back then, I think that first version was really bad. So comparing it to now, nobody would use a wallet that had those features done that way, because a lot of things were really weird and impossible to understand for normal users. And it took us 5 years to get to the point where we are today. But I think that today, we're at a point where there are many wallets that offer great UX. It's much easier for people to start using Lightning and Bitcoin without understanding anything about it. And if you do the experience of getting someone to install, someone who doesn't know much about Bitcoin or Lightning, getting them to install a Lightning wallet and getting them set up and showing them how easy it is to just receive money without registering an account with anyone, without sharing your identity, without sharing a lot of important stuff you don't want to share, it's quite magical. I've been doing it a lot recently with a lot of people, and they always say, whoa, that's it? I have money right now, this is Bitcoin? And I feel getting to that point, since it took a long time and progress was linear and slow, we tend to forget that we got there, but this is really huge, and this is something that we should really be proud of, and I hope that we're able to make more and more people use Bitcoin seamlessly with that.
I would just say, like, referring back to Berlin, like, that was probably peak optimism for Lightning, for sure. Like, I just remember, it just felt like everything that was on stage was just amazing and magical, and I remember, like, Bottle Pay sponsored the whole thing, and they had gotten funding, everybody was excited about Bottle Pay. My main memory was being so excited about Bolt 12. I remember Rusty presenting about it and thinking, oh my God, I was working at Berryfield. I was like, this solves so many things that I would like to have solved in Lightning. And yeah, I'm still excited, just in a much more reserved way. I have been maybe very pessimistic lately about it, but this comes from like that many years of experience. So yeah, I would say, agreeing with all of you to some degree, that it is not as far along as we all were hoping in this magical way. It was much harder to get even where we are now than we thought it would be. Back then, another big part of then to now, I was super excited about the idea of doing tokens on Lightning, and that was what got us into experimenting with RGB and things like this, and we've since dropped all these things. And so just a lot of learning experience between now and then, yeah.
Actually, one more thing that I forgot to mention. I think one thing I didn't foresee 4 or 5 years ago is the value of Lightning being like a settlement layer, interoperable glue between a lot of other systems, and because we don't have a silver bullet yet, and maybe never, on how to scale Bitcoin to everyone and preserve, Bitcoin's on-chain properties.
Scaling Bitcoin
Yeah.
topics shortly.
There's going to be lots of experiments, lots of innovations, and so we have different technologies like various eCash initiatives, Cashew and Fediment, and ARC, and state chains, and now like side chains, and all of this activity. I think it's great to have all that activity, but one thing we see across all of them are integrate with Lightning as the way to pay.
Have a Lightning interface.
Even within like Fediment or Cashew, like intermint settlement is using Lightning. So that's an enormous win for Lightning, and I think that's a slam dunk. Like, I don't see that. I think Lightning has won that. So we should all feel really good about that. So when we maybe get to some of the challenges with Lightning, we should always remember that it does look quite successful in that arena.
I think that we got to a point that Lightning, like, there's no chance Lightning go away. And in that regard, I want to ask you if the reason we started the Lightning Summit is because we felt that the Lightning ecosystem is maturing. Like, we're kind of growing up, there are less hobbyists, more professionals, more Lightning companies, and we wanted to take Lightning to the next level in terms of the ecosystem. Do you think we're ready for prime time? Do you think we're ready for mass adoption?
Absolutely not. Bitcoin can't handle mass adoption. Lightning couldn't handle mass adoption, even if Bitcoin could. Like, the structure of it just isn't in place. Not many of us have even figured out how to run like fully scaled nodes. Like, yeah, we have, I don't know what the peak is, but some tens of thousands of channels in a node. You guys probably have the largest one, I don't know. But like, we're talking about millions of users and killing Visa. Like, this is a whole other stratosphere, and I don't think that we could do it, not right now.
It's interesting because, just to build off what you said in your previous answer, I actually think peak optimism for Lightning for me was 2021 with like the huge wave of people running Umbral nodes, with like the plebnet and everything. Because what I had always personally really wanted to happen from Lightning was, anybody could run a routing node on like a laptop or a small machine in their home and like kind of bring about the home server revolution, right? I was really excited about that idea. And I think now, to like actually answer your question, what we have, one thing that I did not expect, 4 years ago, and I just didn't have, experience in running real big production enterprise software systems, is like, the needs of me running a Raspberry Pi at home versus the needs of like Coinbase or Kraken, running Lightning for millions of users is like dramatically different. And the amount of infrastructure that needs to go in for, high availability, failover, like remote signing, database backups, just like even scaling the software tools to support, thousands of channels instead of tens of channels, right? Like all that type of these scaling limits that we've hit, particularly within, the L&D ecosystem, like that has been something that definitely building out that infrastructure and maintaining all the things to support these bigger users just takes away from new feature development, right? Just naturally. And like, I'm sure the async team sees that. I know the LDK team is seeing that now, right? That you guys are maturing and you have kind of external users that are using it. Like when you have to start maintaining these feature sets for them, like you can't push forward on new roadmap items quite that much. So I think that part of scaling up Lightning to get to where we can support these really big entities has taken a lot of work, but I do think that's necessary, and the fact that demand is pulling that investment in that infrastructure and in the professionalization of these systems, I think is a really good sign. Do I think that we could support Visa level transaction volume tomorrow? It would be tough, right? Like probably not. Do I think that the fundamentals of Lightning and like how I see it scaling as more and more payment volume comes through the network and kind of pulls more investment in professionalizing the setups and bringing more people online, like I actually do think that the fundamentals are there. I really do. I think the fundamentals are there. I think the growth will persist kind of naturally, linearly, like Bastien said, until we get to a point where, yeah, we are in the big leagues. So I think we're on the right path for sure. And I think the one other thing that's just an interesting anecdote is I remember, like, I think it was early 2021, before the El Salvador news, we had a call with Jack Mallers at Strike, and this is, peak bad boy Jack Mallers, dropping F-bombs on CNBC and stuff like that. And he kind of like sheepishly asked, he's like, so, like for Strike, are you guys working on any accounting tools? Like, we need to pay taxes in April, right? That was like the first kind of sign that was like, oh man, we're really professionalizing. Like, we're growing up. Our needs are different than like, we need to support all these new kinds of payments. So that was kind of like, it's been a big push, a big wave to kind of grow up collectively, but I do think we're on the right track and we've built out a lot of really good infrastructure to support kind of the next wave of companies that are coming on board.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about the Bitcoin ecosystem as a whole is that it's being really honest and transparent about where issues are, where trade-offs are, and the fact that it's really much, much, much harder to build a decentralized version of Visa than to build a centralized version of Visa, and that we're not going to get there in one day. We may never going to get there to exactly the same thing. We have inherent trade-offs that make some things more difficult. And it's okay. And I think that what I like is that we're not rushing into those things and taking short-term decisions that would be harmful in the long run. On the contrary, it's really frustrating because sometimes things are really going slow. For example, Bolt 12 was first announced in 2019 in Berlin. We're only getting there now. Hopefully by the end of the year, we're going to start having a first version rolling out. But it took 5 years for something that, as an end user, looks really simple, but is not really, if you want to build it correctly. And we're really lucky that we have the time to build those things correctly, that we have the funding and we have the support to make sure that we do those things the right way and we don't rush into poor technical decisions that could be really harmful in the long run. So it is frustrating at times, but I think it's okay because right now people don't want mass hyper-Bitcoinization. We want to build something that is usable by anyone, but I don't think everybody needs Bitcoin now. I hope most people, anyone who needs it will be able to use it, and that's what we are building towards. But we don't need to be able to support billions of users now. We may not even need to be able to support billions of users in 10 years. Maybe it's going to take us more time. Maybe we will never get to a point where billions of users want to use Bitcoin, but we are still slowly progressing, and people who may need Bitcoin are discovering it today, are getting better and better tools to be able to use it for things that really matter, to solve problems that they are not able to solve with anything else. And I think that's the important thing that matters. It's not really the number of people using it, it's that people who really need it are able to do it, and that there's nothing else that does it better than Bitcoin.
I just want to clarify something around this discourse. There are two things that were kind of confusing: the enterprise B2B use cases and the non. I think when you talk, Bastien, you always think non-custodial peer-to-peer Lightning, and that's a bit confusing for everyone. I guess when I asked if Lightning is ready for prime time, is more on the B2B side of use cases. Is Coinbase adopting Lightning? Would users be happy with that integration? John, what do you think?
I'm not sure what you mean. Well, you think that whatever you're asking, we don't know what the user experience of Lightspark.
I'll tell you where I'm coming from. Like cash integrated Lightning. We saw Kraken integrating Lightning. I didn't see it move the needle when it comes to Bitcoin adoption, Lightning adoption.
I don't know about adoption, but I mean, I was part of getting Bitfinex to be the first large exchange to support Lightning, and they're still one of the largest node sets in the network. So I don't know how you measure adoption.
How Bitfinex measure adoption? I think it's still very small percentage from the interaction with the exchange.
Yeah, I think that measuring it through exchanges is probably not the best way, because how they would measure is whether Lightning brought them new users. And I don't think that the use case of an exchange is Lightning. And so it's more of a payment method.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be an exchange, but it can be, what I'm trying kind of to say, it can be a B2B use case.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core of Lightning, for one of the things I've definitely learned, something I always suspected pretty early on, but now I'm like more hardcore about it, is that no matter how much we fail, if we fail at the Lightning narratives or some of them, the spectrum that won't fail will always be B2B. Because just a payment channel from a peer to a peer, and then being able to string together a small network, that's just always going to be something that will be useful.
And it seems we're getting closer. Like for me, the fact that we kind of, I never had that vision of everyone running a Lightning node in their homes, because it's not even a hardware problem, it's a software problem. It's inherent to Lightning that you need to be professional in order to run a Lightning node. So the fact that we kind of gave up on the everyone runs a routing node dream, I'm happy with that. And I'm happy that we have a more professional managed Lightning nodes. And I feel with all the power in the Lightning ecosystem, we are getting to a phase that we're kind of ready for prime time adoption.
I just add a nuance that I'm happy about those things too, but I think that he is right that you still need it to be that anybody could do it.
Yeah. Steve?
I'm not sure if I have much to add. I mean, I'm confused on the B2B, B2C in the sense that did Cash App integrate Lightning well for themselves? Yes, and it works fine. But does it have a lot of traction? Your impression is correct, I think. I mean, it's actually similar to like River's report. It's grown a lot, but it's grown from tiny to small. So it is up and to the right, and I'm sure that's the case for Kraken and every service, and it'll be the same with Coinbase, I'm sure. But it does work fine, and there is growth. So as long as we maintain that growth, we only need 2 more 1,200% growth to reach Visa. So let's do that over the next 6 years.
So you're subscribing to the linear growth. You guys don't think there will be hockey stick in Lightning adoption, Ryan stable coins on Lightning?
Yeah, so I would, before I get to that, and thank you for the layup, I would say first that squaring the non-custodial use case at the edge, which all of us want to happen and want to thrive, and it's important, not your keys, not your coins, for Bitcoin, for that use case to work, squaring that kind of difficulties with the enterprise B2B core of the network, really getting healthy and working well, which I'm also extremely happy with, is just networks like this. from highways to, airplanes to, oil pipelines to telecommunications networks, which I bucket Lightning in the same category of, all of them have a very well-known thing called a last mile problem, right? Where it's like exponentially more expensive to lay the last mile of fiber to the people in rural areas than it is to lay fiber in the core of a city, right? Because there's less people served at the last mile, so the dollars it takes to install the infrastructure is the same for a mile of fiber in a city versus out in rural, but you're not able to kind of recoup that investment as well. So this is a well-known thing, and I think Async, Breeze, and many of these mobile wallets have done, I think, an excellent job of mitigating this last mile problem and providing a really good experience. And there's tons of great work going on with async payments, with kind of waking up the phone, with splicing and all the different things on liquidity management to try and mitigate that issue. But just fundamentally, there are a lot more difficulties at the edges of the network than there are in the core of the network, right? If you're able to just manage 5 BTC channels with other professional node operators who are watching the node or have a team of people watching the node every day, right? That's just much easier to provide a good solution than one person who makes a payment every 2 weeks and doesn't sync their node or anything like that, right? It's just it's much harder. So
it's also about the economics.
yes, and the economics as well, for sure. So that's one thing. I just wanted to make that point. So do I think there's going to be hockey stick growth? I actually think that kind of combination of two things. I think combination of one with stablecoins on Lightning, kind of the whole thesis, and I presented it yesterday, is that the market for Bitcoin payments is small, right? Bitcoin is monetizing. It's clearly a store of value. That narrative has escaped the lab and gone mainstream. Using it as a medium of exchange, why would you spend the thing that you think is going to double in value or 5x in value over the next year, right? Some people have to. Some people, they don't have other options. But just your average everyday person, the market for Bitcoin payments is small. The market for dollar payments is very big. One of the biggest in the world, if not the biggest. And so I think that has the opportunity to bring a lot more users to Lightning for its economics, for its settlement reasons, for its global reach. But just you can do that with dollars instead of with Bitcoin. And I think we've seen kind of some early proofs of this, again, from Strike kind of moving their model from Bitcoin payments to we'll spend Bitcoin on your behalf, you spend dollars. That was kind of an early kind of UX proof point. It was oh, maybe that's kind of what people want a little bit more. So I think a combination of that, of retrieving other markets, and then while I'm still very passionate about the non-custodial use case, is because that allows you to scale your business at the speed of a software company. Right? If you don't need kind of the login hangups and the KYC hangups, and you can just scale very quickly where you download the app and then boom, you're going, that's where you can really get viral growth, right? That's where you can really get a killer app that comes online and, I send a group message to my friends. I'm like, oh my God, you guys got to try this. This is so cool. And then they all sign up, they tell their friends, and then, in a couple weeks you have 1 million users signed up, right? I just think that the overhead required to sign up for an app that is, more custodial or enterprise, I kind of think would hamper that sort of viral adoption. So I do think it's very important to keep solving those last mile problems so that we can get, and maybe it's the combination of those two, new markets and, lower barrier to entry for users and new virality is what allows for real hockey stick growth.
Yeah, just one more thing. So to add on to that, we haven't really talked about what drives demand. I think we will get exponential growth when we have use cases that are compelling. And maybe it is Nostr taking off, or Stacker News, or gaming, which there's a few attempts at that, but hasn't really taken off yet. Or gambling, I think, global gambling on soccer or something. Micro bets, prop bets on soccer globally, I could see taking off. But we don't know. So I think 5 years from now, something will have taken off, and then we'll all point back to that and be like, oh, it was obvious. But we don't really know right now. But that will be, clearly we can get all the infrastructure and products and protocols perfect, but you still need consumer demand.
We'll never get them perfect, don't worry. John?
So sorry, what was the original question? I think we've mutated.
if you are kind of seeing hockey stick growth on the horizon through either B2B use cases or...
I am skeptical. The use case of Lightning is high-frequency payments. You can kind of juice that a little bit by using an LSP and say all your payments, but what are the
Yeah, that's...
check. What are the killer apps that would actually require high frequency that wouldn't also be more efficient if they weren't high frequency? And I don't know that there's, I know for sure B2B is one, but beyond that, I can't speculate.
But even in the B2B category, you said exchanges, that's simply not the right use case. So what is the right use case?
No, I didn't say. B2B, I think, is the core use case.
No, I mean
Yeah.
exchanges. From the B2B perspective, you said exchanges, that's not the right way to measure Lightning adoption.
I said, there's a context. I wouldn't measure Bitfinex user growth as success of Lightning because it's a payment method, not their product.
So on the B2B angle, like remittance, what's the use case that
Just settlement between businesses. Basically, like exactly what Bitfinex does was with BitRefill. I think it was the first example of this, like just a payment channel where one is providing a service or product to the other's users, but instead of having credit terms, you can just have dynamic settlement. So every time somebody buys a gift card on Bitfinex, what's happening in the background is Bitfinex is taking money out of their account, and Bitfinex is paying BitRefill in one channel or two channels or something. So you have this highly efficient, no credit terms, no trust required, completely dynamic relationship. Lightning, that's a killer use case for Lightning. It's not used as frequently as I thought it would be, but it will always be valid. Anything on top of that, it's like, okay, it's mostly going to be measured in contrast to on-chain efficiency. So you're going to say, okay, can I do at least 3 or 4 transactions to justify even having a Lightning channel? And how much can I raise that number so I don't have to keep making more channels or making more on-chain operations? This is still going to be pretty limited. And another issue I see with a hockey stick vision is that the on-chain really limits that possibility. Like, what will happen over time, in my opinion, is that the cost of Lightning will basically trend towards the cost on-chain. And so as the on-chain fees rise, the Lightning fees will rise too. That's why the nano payments thing was never going to be a thing, because it's just, nano payments are barely justifiable on a computation level, never mind attaching Bitcoin to it.
Just something I would like to highlight as well is that it's really hard. In Lightning, there is no single publicly visible metric that lets you measure success. It's really hard to measure success. It really depends on what use case you are focusing on. And by design, everything that happens in the network is usually private between the people who are involved in the payment. So for example, a use case like what John describes, only the 2 parties using that channel would know that there's a lot of volume going in there. Everyone else will just never know it. So people who only focus on number of nodes in the network, for example, to measure growth, are really focusing on the wrong thing. I think that in the long run, or at least what we've been seeing, is that the number of public nodes and maybe even public capacity of the network has been staying quite stable or maybe sometimes decreasing. But actually the volume has been increasing a lot because this is just a pipes system. So velocity of money moving inside the pipes is something that you cannot easily measure and share publicly. So it's really hard to measure success, and it's really hard to know what you want to be looking at for success, because I still think we don't know what the best killer apps are for Lightning. We want it to be general enough that people can come up with new ideas on how to use this technology for something that we haven't thought of. And that's what I like, is that I think we potentially enable a lot of things that cannot be done with standard payment methods. So I still expect to be surprised by what some people are going to build with Lightning, and those are going to be killer use cases for some people.
I actually think there are some killer apps that, to your point, people aren't aware of the volumes that are going through these apps. LN Market, for example, I think people will be surprised by the volume that they process based on their Lightning node capacity.
Tell us more.
I was thinking out loud a little bit. I think there actually might be a metric that you could measure. It'd be slightly abstracted, but what you could do is say, choose any metric of Lightning growth, but at the same time, on-chain fees staying the same or going down. So basically, you know you're getting more output of Bitcoin, but the fees aren't going up. So you're basically moving scale from one network to the other. That would be an honest measurement.
Going forward, guys, what do you think we need to focus on Lightning?
Yeah, I think the focus needs to be on kind of, two things in my mind, which are the two things I mentioned earlier. One is like, because now we have a stable network, right? I think we can all agree the network is stable and it works. Payment success rates are pretty high. I think it's time to like really go out and try and acquire new users, try and experiment with new use cases, try and go attack new markets. Because if Lightning, again, if you look at Lightning as just a generic payment network, right, competing with all the other ways to make payments on planet Earth, right? Like I think it is very cheap or very low cost. You're not supposed to say cheap. Very low cost, very fast to settle. The global reach is something that every other payment network would envy, and I think it works. So I think going out and attacking new markets is very important. But then I think also continually like lowering the friction to onboard new users. That's always been a pain point with Lightning, and it's something that is, always we are continually collectively as an ecosystem lowering and trying to work because, people are busy. People have different priorities. They just want payments to work. They just want it to be a utility. It's only like the nerds in this room that really want to care about like how their channels are configured and like how fast their node is syncing. Other people just want to press a button and just have it work. And so I think that kind of onboarding experience is something that we like continually collectively need to be lowering the barrier to entry for.
I think no KYC. Let's not lose sight of that. And it's, I talked about Bolt 12 yesterday, but it's broader than just Bolt 12. That's just like one piece of the puzzle. But personally, why do I work on Bitcoin? It's to preserve properties from cash that people have used for forever in the digital world. And it's really hard. We have massive challenges to do no KYC. I'm worried about.
Can we do no KYC?
Well, it's a good question. It's a huge risk, especially around like LSPs and regulators. I worry about those being choke points. So for individuals around the world, scaling. First of all, scaling is hard. But even for any level of scaling, being able to actually provide that last mile liquidity without requiring KYC, I think is going to be a challenge. And but I think it's essential. Like
But what's the game plan?
Okay, I'll give my best attempt, but I'm seeking other feedback on that. I think like the LSP spec group, which is met yesterday, and a lot of people here are working on that, including you guys. I think that's one answer. So we want so maybe we don't have every user running an Umbrella in their home, but we do want more than just like Synonym, Breeze, and Block running LSPs. We don't want like just a dozen global LSPs. We want thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. So working on standardization, making it as lowering the boundaries to being able to do that, be it both technical and financing, is important. And it's definitely not easy. I'm not like super confident we're going to achieve that, but I think we need to work towards that. I think that will help a lot. Because if we do get scale there, then that becomes difficult to enforce regulatory-wise. And also, the more global it is, the better. Like, it shouldn't just all be in the US or Western markets. So that's one thing we can do. And then, we can also reinforce culturally within the development community and the Bitcoin community the importance of no KYC, because it is hard. I think it's easy to, as Craig Ross said, like, this erosion of principles, because it's really hard. And also for Like for Spiral, it's easier because we don't have to make a profit. We're not a startup like my other fellow panelists here. All of you guys have to pay your employees and figure out a business model, and you have shorter term needs. So we definitely have a luxury, but so it's even harder as an entrepreneur to stick with that. But I encourage all of you to do your best, and everyone in the audience.
Until we'll go to jail. John?
So as far as KYC and censorship, I would say the dynamics are like this. You have on one side, the more decentralized Lightning is, the more it sucks, the less utility it has. The more centralized it is, the more censorable it is. So you really have to try to find the sweet spot, which is, like he said, you kind of have to optimize for both, because that provides the most access to be any type of user, either one that is stranded somewhere in the network, or having sub-networks that don't even reach the
But
rest of
inherently, you can't optimize for both.
Well, what you can do is, the way to optimize for both is to allow for both. And you can't stop somebody from becoming really large if that's what the market wants, or Lightning becoming really decentralized because that's what the government wants. You can't avoid the trends of what the market will choose, but you can allow for them. And so,
But you optimize for one.
I guess as a company, you wouldn't want to be working on both. I think that it would be nice to see people that really prioritize one, and other companies that really prioritize the other. And I think with the LSP specs, that's kind of what we talk about. But like I mentioned yesterday in the LSP meeting, like if we allow any of us to get too big, we will get regulated, and we will get censored, and we'll get more regulations. Then as far as answering your question, as far as what we should work on, it's probably a little easier for me to say what we shouldn't work on, and I'll say that. But as far as what we should, like, anything that improves user experience and removes complexity for the user is going to give Lightning a better chance. And anything that provides reliability from the LSP and provider level is going to give Lightning a better chance. So I would say working on the actual scaling for LSPs and those concepts, and things like splicing and making sure those are widely adopted for user experience and saving money and this kind of thing. Those are probably the areas. But I also think making the right decisions is choosing what not to work on. And I think that working on things that, for example, eCash bridging over Lightning, tokens bridging over Lightning, I personally think these are distractions. I think those are going to be some costs that don't actually lead to as much outcome as the other priorities. And I can't stop anybody from doing them, or I can't stop them from being trendy, but I think they are ultimately going to all end up as trends.
My point of view is more going to be on the engineering side. So because I'm more really seeing all the potential issues, technical issues we have. So I think that our focus has already been for the past year or two, and is going to be for the years coming, to work on everything that makes it, since the main issue with Lightning is handling liquidity, making sure that your liquidity is well allocated, because that's what makes you win or makes you survive in an environment that's really competitive. So any feature that we can do to make it easier to move liquidity to where it's going to be more useful and makes it cheaper to do so by reducing our on-chain footprint are things that are not that much user visible, but are really important to make the network more efficient. And by being more efficient, it's going to cost less fees, so it's easier to open for anyone to use. So those are things that they are not at all low-hanging fruits. They are really hard, and making those things, those protocols secure and efficient takes a lot of time. But those are things that I think is really important, and we are working on, and it takes a while. And also making sure that the network is stable enough, works well enough, keep on improving reliability of payments, reliability of channels, are things that take a long time, a lot of effort, because it's hard to work on secure decentralized protocols, but it's really challenging and interesting. And if we want anyone to start really depending on that, looking at Lightning and saying, oh, this thing has been working for years, it seems stable, it's just been great for anyone who uses it, so now we can build on top of it. We want people to look at Lightning and say those things and think that this is something stable they can easily build on. So anything that we can do to make sure that it just works better, doesn't need to add too many new features, I think, because having a global payment system that just works without, and that is really open to anyone, is already a huge feature in itself. So making sure that this thing, this core feature, works as well as it can and is as secure as it can is, I think, time worth investing. So I think this is one of the things that we're going to be working on a lot in the past years, in the next years.
I just wanted to chime in on John's point about optimizing for both decentralization and centralization at the same time. So like Lightning Labs is a developer tools, developer infrastructure company. We don't directly engage with end users. So we actually are, that is our whole philosophy, is kind of let us focus on kind of the protocol layer, the infrastructure layer, the developer tools layer. We want a million flowers to bloom, on top of the L&D infrastructure as a kind of platform, right? We want all these developers going out, building companies, building startups, focusing on their specific centralized vertical, and having, tons of them all growing and competing the Lightning Network collectively together is how we end up with a decentralized network, right? And so that has been kind of, that has been how, the network has grown over the last 4 years, has been, us trying to lower the barrier to entry for founders and entrepreneurs to get up and running on the network and just letting them focus on acquiring users while we focus on like making the Lightning part work and hopefully making the Lightning part not take up a large part of their, mental capacity as they're running their business.
But even in that level, in the implementation level of the specific Lightning implementation, you see the diversity. L&D isn't really geared to serve non-custodial end users. That's what I meant by saying you can't really optimize for both. The fact that you're focusing on high availability, reliability, remote signer makes you kind of defocus from features that non-custodial end users need.
Yeah, it's, maybe one day when we're making, billions of dollars a year, we can do both, but just kind of at the current moment with a relatively small team, yeah, it's hard to do both. And you kind of have to pick one and focus on it, especially because the needs are so different, right? It is very different, and I think that is kind of one of those things where, yeah, it is what it is. Hopefully, as we grow, we'll learn to walk and chew the proverbial bubblegum at the same time. But for the last little bit, definitely the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and the squeakiest wheels have been the big B2B enterprise users that need bigger enterprise tools.
And I understand kind of the step-by-step approach, the incremental approach that you all kind of alluding to, but what about, like, you don't have dreams, like channel factories, LN symmetry, like where's the next big thing, like, that's gonna transform the user experience? Like, why aren't we shooting for the moon?
Let's start down there.
Bastien? Okay, package relay, I understand you want low on-chain footprint.
Those are not even dreams anymore. I know they're coming. We're going to have those, so I'm really happy. Those were my dreams a few years ago, and now that they're happening, yeah, I'm thinking about the next things. But the next thing is really much harder because it's much more. The next big thing that could change a lot in the L2 ecosystem as a whole are some form of covenants on Bitcoin, something that's going to require a soft fork, so it's going to take a while, and it's been discussed for years. So I kind of stopped dreaming about L2 LN symmetry. I'm still hoping that it gets there, but the way it's going to get there is probably going to change a lot and still going to take a long time. So I've paused my dream on that and tried to optimize the current Lightning to fix a lot of the things that we can fix. And I think that thanks to package relay and all the maple work, there are already a lot of things that we can improve that are going to be really nice for in the shorter term future. In the much longer term, yeah, I'm just an engineer, to be honest. I'm not a dreamer. I am in a way, but we'll see.
In the case of Lightning, at least, I think I'd rather leave the dreams to someone else. I think there's just so much work to do. There's so much complexity. I don't want more complexity in my Lightning vision. Like, I just don't want it. I have no interest in it. I am a dreamer in very much in other senses, like when it comes to peer-to-peer and identity and web of trust and these things. But when it comes to Lightning, I think it's time to like tone down the dreaming. I think that's how the question and the whole panel started, with like talking about how we were back in Berlin. Like everything was just a huge, amazing dream. Everything was magic back then. The possibilities were no limit.
But
know?
without that spirit, I don't think we've gotten so far as we've gotten.
Right, but as he said, like he was a dreamer, and then he through market forces became practical, and the same thing for me.
But
In
that
a way,
dynamic.
some of our dreams came true, because 5 years ago, being able to pay for a beer using Lightning instantly and having almost no fees attached to that was a dream, and it's just that we became accustomed to it because it just works. We've done it.
We were able to buy beer in Berlin, but it was one out of 30 tries. So.
I'm just taking the context as your example was UTXO sharing, which is dreams are more complexity. And so in other words, the dreams of Lightning actually doing what it says on the tin, that's different than what else can we tack onto this. And I like personally, like your example, I am extremely skeptical that UTXO sharing is a significant solution to anything.
That's the reason dreamers are moving to other technologies. Steve?
I'll try to, since we're struggling to dream, I'll try to help us dream. But I mean, there's different levels of dreaming. These short-term dreams are really 5-year-ago dreams, right? Bolt 12, we already mentioned, was talked about 5 years ago from Rusty, and now we're still presenting. We've just gotten to a point where the Lightning implementations support it, but now we need the wallets to support it. So that's one of my dreams, is that we actually realize that over the coming years. Another quick one is just the LSP stuff that we mentioned. Like a dream there is that we actually don't have 3, but we have 3,000 or 30,000 globally, and it's a healthy, it's economical, etc. Other relatively near-term things is Taproot. Okay, then the next level. I guess I'm more encouraged to look at UTXO sharing. I mean, anyone who's been in Lightning for 5 years, we've always known that there's scaling limitations based on the block size. We can only do so many UTXOs. So if we truly want to try to create a silver bullet solution that does reach every person, machine-to-machine payments, etc., we have to either increase the block size or share UTXOs. I don't think there's any other answer. It's one of those two categories. I'm open to either, but as we know, increasing the block size would be a substantial effort. So I guess, yeah, I'm encouraged to explore sharing UTXOs. So I think staying on top of some of the recent proposals is good. Like timeout trees is one that a few of us have studied recently. It's not a panacea, but I think it's at least interesting to explore. It solves a lot of the current problems of scaling, but it has its own, as most proposals, there's trade-offs, and I don't know if those trade-offs are worth it yet. I think exploring things like fee insurance and sharing costs of unilateral exits, which would tie into a timeout trees proposal, but also other proposals, I think that's an interesting exploration. I think exploring fidelity bonds is interesting as maybe a way to reduce trust in an LSP if they have something at stake that they could lose. And then we can mishmash those together. But ultimately, it would lead to better scaling of on-chain Bitcoin properties to more users. More, less trust, more self-custody.
I guess my dream, I'm gonna first start with an analogy. I think the best analogy, or the analogy that I draw on the most to kind of think about how Lightning as a protocol is progressing and will continue to grow is VoIP, voice over IP. So for those that are unfamiliar, voice over IP kind of like got started in like late 80s, early 90s. And really, people had all sorts of dreams for it, right? They're like, one day you're going to be able to do all your phone calls over the internet. It's going to be amazing. But where it really started and first got traction was in kind of enterprise international phone calls. Like, do you remember that it used to cost $5 to call Japan, right? Or it was really expensive because these were all, telecom infrastructure was all kind of local fiat government operated systems, none of which talked to each other and which were very expensive to bridge, and there was not really any incentive to bridge. And so what VoIP did was to let people just route right around those inefficiencies between these fiat systems and really easily call at the speed of the internet, speed and cost of the internet. So that first caught on in enterprises who were looking to like draw on more enterprise efficiency and lower their internal cost bills, right? So that was kind of the entire 90s and early 2000s. Until after years and years and years of just kind of grinding away with linear growth, business development, enterprise SaaS, et cetera, eventually you got to the point where there was a protocol that was really solid, really firm, had a bunch of developer tooling fixed and figured out, and an internet with a lot of bandwidth where you had Skype. And all of a sudden Skype went viral, and this was like a retail application, a killer app for VoIP that went viral around the world and got millions and millions and millions of users. And that was kind of where you saw the hockey stick growth that now leads to, I have VoIP in my iPhone. And probably if you're connected to Wi-Fi, probably the vast majority of the phone calls that you make are over VoIP and you don't even know it, right? So like that kind of trend is how I see Lightning progressing. And real quick.
Just to complete your analogy, and we have voice over IP in Slack and Telegram. It's integrated into every app.
That was a good addition. I appreciate that. So that is kind of like how I would like to see Lightning progress. That is my dream for Lightning. And I think right now we're at the stage where although it's exciting, it's not the dream, it's the slog of like enterprise adoption, right? Coinbase and then Nubank and Revolut and you go down the list of the fintechs. But I think to get to the point where then we have the Skype moment, I do think that is something that is predominantly going to be retail driven, and I think the enablement for that is something that solves the last mile problem that I talked about earlier. So like the dream for a channel factory for me, for UTXO sharing, would be, an LSP has a 10 Bitcoin UTXO that they've allocated on chain. From that UTXO, they're able to sell what are now kind of zero conf channels non-interactively to users who show up, and they can kind of sell a non-interactive channel, commit that it could be confirmed in the future, and the user could always unilaterally confirm it on chain if they wanted to, but through some magic, the LSP is not able to spend that little sub UTXO without the user signature. Right, so you're able to onboard these users into these UTXOs without on-chain channel actions. You're able also to splice liquidity in and out of these kind of sub-off-chain channels, without touching the chain, or maybe you have to update the chain, this output once a week or something. But you're able to essentially do what the LSPs are doing today, like what I think Async in particular is doing today is like a really good example. But instead of each of those liquidity management actions requiring a chain hit, it's able to be done off-chain. I think that's the dream, right? And the devil, of course, is in the details. One thing that I'm really encouraged by is it seems that, I know with Arc, we have actual working code, right? People have taken these ideas and these, high-minded things of how this could work and have actually gone and implemented it. And then figured out we need, CTV is not sufficient. Maybe we need this additional thing. And, we thought we had these big liquidity problems, but we, solved some of them and had some others. So I'm really encouraged by that. I think we will see a lot more of this momentum of people kind of taking these high-minded ideas and then actually implementing them. I really hope that this is something that Lightning Labs can start doing as well once kind of stablecoin saga is complete, that we can devote some resources to kind of scaling out these edges of the network, because I really think that that's kind of like the next thing that enables this hockey stick growth, this kind of killer app Skype phase, and takes us from kind of like core enterprise B2B software to like retail everyday, end user applications.
Since this has become like a UTXO sharing, cheerleading session, I just want to offer a counter argument. So what is the counter argument to that? The premise is if I can't afford my own UTXO, I need to share one, right? And so if I need to share one, well, let me just complete the thought.
We're kind of out of time, guys.
Okay, I'll just complete the thought and I'll get the last word. So if I can't afford my own UTXO, how can I afford credible exit?
Well,
Let's stop at that. Ryan, I asked for a dream, not a fantasy. Thank you so much. I feel like we could have sat here for another hour and talk about like so many things. But I appreciate you guys working on Lightning. I also subscribe to the feeling that we've gone so much. We've done so much in the past 5 years. Like I'm very happy with the progress that we've made. I think also the metrics shows that. So looking forward to the next 5 years.
Yeah, and just to add, I thought about it a bit more. I think that my dream as an engineer is that we can attract the dreamers and that the dreamers can realize their dreams on top of Lightning and that they can surprise us. And that's, I think, the goal for the next 5 years, that it's stable enough, usable enough, easy enough to integrate, that it attracts the dreamers and that we don't have to dream. People can do it for us.
Let's give these guys a big round of applause. Good work, guys. Thank you, bro. The big takeaway from this panel is, Bastien, engineers don't dream. They schedule, probably. Okay, guys, now we have a coffee break. We'll be here on this stage at 11:30 sharp. So you have 23 minutes with another amazing panel. Thank you. So,
Did we just get our scripts? I'm missing mine.
You are free as a lighting partner.
I'll be very quick because we are running late. Okay? All right, welcome back. Please have a seat. I'm talking to you guys back there. Have a seat because the next one is another super interesting panel. Please, guys, come closer, have a seat, find your spot. Thank you so much. Okay, so wallets. That's the topic we're about to discuss. Lightning wallets, on-chain wallets, hardware wallets with Lightning capabilities. Wallets are the way we interact with Bitcoin on a daily basis. And the next topic will discuss the future of wallets. So please welcome on stage Giacomo Zucco, Matt Corallo, Anand Tapadia, Alekos Filini, and Christian Decker. Big round of applause. Thank you, guys. Alekos.
One, two. Okay. Oh, but you sit down in the wrong order compared to. Anyway, I will do it. No, it's the right order there, but it's the wrong conceptual order. But now I explain
okay,
you why.
Giacomo.
Yes, this autism moment. So the reason I was thinking about order is that we are not only discussing Lightning wallets. We are at the Lightning Summit, so we will discuss a lot about Lightning wallets, which I think are still something that has to find their final form. They are evolving a lot in terms of UX and features, but we're also discussing on-chain things. For example, Matt is working on a library for wallets, basically, LDK, and you will tell us a little bit about that, which is focused mostly on Lightning. Christian is working on the Lightning implementation for Blockstream's core Lightning, which is also right now interacting heavily with Lightning wallets, for example, with Green and Breeze through the Greenlight thing. But Alekos is working on an on-chain wallet so far, at least, which is basically a new hardware wallet, a new conceptual, a new take on hardware wallets and signing device. Why Anand has an interesting story because basically he started very, very Lightning contiguous with Exa wallet, and now with Keeper he's focusing more on something closer to custody, inheritance, and let's say more on-chain huge amount of use cases. So we have a very good spectrum of different applications, and we can probably try to understand also the possible interaction between the generic use cases. First of all, let's just do a recap of what you do and what you, let's just be corporate shields and shield your corporation. So Matt, LDK, tell us why it's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I work on the LDK project with a number of folks from Spiral, as well as a number of external contributors. Lightning Dev Kit, or LDK, is a library to implement Lightning in any way you want. So it scales from possibly the largest custodian for Lightning, which is Cash App, all the way down to mobile devices, and even some parts of it you can run on hardware wallets. So it really ranges the entire spectrum, and in order to do that, it's super flexible. If you want to use LDK directly, it's got a lot of different pieces. You have to kind of wire up to your network connections and your storage and your blockchain source and all that kind of stuff. We also now have LDK Node, which is a more opinionated wrapper around LDK that's super easy to use. Has whatever 3 or 4. Okay, maybe 10 or 12 functions that you can call to like start the node and get channels from an LSP using the new LSP spec, and then send and receive money, and that's it. And it's just super easy API. So take a look at that. That's more opinionated, more targeted at mobile, maybe a little less targeted at kind of the big metal, large custodians. But we also have people doing all kinds of interesting use cases, including now apparently Lightspark and apparently Coinbase. So yeah, it ranges the whole scale.
Cool. Anand, your story is articulated in the space of wallets. So what do you do and what did you do?
So I'll start with a little bit of history because some of you might not know me as some other gents on the stage. So my journey with wallet started in 2016. In fact, one of the first wallets I wanted to create had Ethereum in it. Then I realized that I can't focus on multiple coins. So the reason I first started focusing only on Bitcoin was not ideology, but operationally I just wanted to focus on one thing to start off with. And then I started getting orange pilled, and then I realized why this is the only thing we should focus on. But anyway.
So come for the business, remain for the revolution.
Yeah. It was operational decision, but then when you learn more, you just get stuck. You can't get out of it. And I've been bugging Giacomo ever since 2017, asking him questions and getting voice notes from him and stuff like that. So it has been a long journey. I've learned a lot of things, experimented with a lot of things. A lot of things did not work out, a lot of things worked out. And in the current avatar of our wallet, we are focusing on, like Giacomo briefly mentioned, we are currently focusing on securing your asset as a generational wealth. So that involves multisig, that involves hardware wallet integration, that involves privacy stuff. So yeah, that is where the journey is, but the journey is not over. It is a journey. And yeah, that's why I'm here to share more of what I've learned.
Thank you. Alekos, Shield portal for us.
Okay, so maybe a bit of backstory on me as well. I started working on Bitcoin in a bunch of companies, including planb.network and Blockstream. Then I moved on to launch a project called BDK, which is kind of LDK's brother, but for on-chain, for big blockers. And I'm not a big blocker, but I mostly focus on-chain. So I started this project, I worked on it for a while, for 3 or 4 years, and now I'm launching this new project, which is called Portal. It's an hardware wallet specifically optimized for mobile. So I don't know if you've seen it around on Twitter. I also have some with me if you want to check them out in person. But yeah, it's hardware wallet like any other, nothing new in what it does, but it does it differently in a way that works better with smartphones. So I'm focusing on the mobile and hardware kind of market, which is a bit new. Nobody's really doing it as far as I know. Yeah, and I'm here representing the on-chain side of the debate.
Our local Roger Ver, basically. Christian, who are you? What do you do? How you discover the Lightning Network besides inventing it, basically?
Well, okay. So I've always been interested in systems that scale. That was what Nerd sniped me in the first place. Back in 2009, when I first read the white paper, that doesn't scale. Come on, that can't work. And so I got nerd sniped into researching, into looking into scalability from a very early time, and that led to my PhD, which then ended exactly when the Lightning Network got started, with my last publication essentially being a competitor to Lightning. I joined the winning team, I guess, because there is no point in creating 2 networks that aren't compatible, and I've been working on Core Lightning ever since. While working on Core Lightning, I noticed that operating a Lightning node is bloody hard. I mean, even well-educated and experienced Bitcoiners have a hard time running a Lightning node in a secure fashion. Also because the trade-offs we have are quite different from what normal operators of software might be used to, right? Restoring a database, oh boy, you just lost money, right? There's all of these details you have to know, and it's not easy. And what good is a system that can scale if there isn't demand for it? Sure, it's interesting for us engineers, but it's pretty pointless actually. So there was this recognition that we somehow need to ensure that the next generation of Bitcoiners can have a good experience, first of all, with Bitcoin, and get nerd sniped themselves into updating and educating themselves on how to take on more ownership. And usually that means go custodial, right? Because that's probably the best user experience, but also the user experience we want them to have the least, because that's not then you don't have any incentive of
because it's a beautiful user experience until it's not, because they take your funds.
Exactly. So, and the point of Greenlight, my current project, is exactly we want to take core Lightning, run it for you, but in a way that we don't have the keys. So we wanted to take the spectrum, which so far was a dichotomy, right? Self-operated, but really, really hard and dangerous if you don't know exactly what you're doing. Or custodial, we try to find this point in the middle in this, of the spectrum where we can say, okay, yeah, we take on some of the responsibilities of running the nodes, but you are still in full and exclusive control of your funds. And so this then turned into essentially a service that we want to offer to developers, but also end users, because we also see that, yes, we Bitcoiners are very interested in Bitcoin, of course, but that is not in itself the reason why people choose to use Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin usage is always a means to an end. And so we also need to enable application developers and other systems to integrate with Lightning and with Bitcoin, and offering a simple API that you can use and be sure that when it is there, when you need it, it is there, and still not holding any keys. That was kind of the technical challenge that we thought, okay, yeah, we have a solution for it, and now it's 2 years later and it is working, and we are really, really proud of what we achieved so far. With several applications coming out of stealth and betas, people onboarding very quickly, and it's just very satisfying to see this actually taking off.
Thank you, especially to Christian, because he basically completed half of the panel while you were being too much short in your answer.
We have to fill an hour, right?
Thank you. So we are discussing wallets. The terminology is a little bit confused in Bitcoin. For example, there was a very famous criticism by Antonopoulos back in 2012 about the term wallet not being great for Bitcoin because it's actually more like a keychain. And also the term wallet is abused for many, many different things. Some people are calling wallets the device containing the keys. Some people are calling wallets the seed phrase that will generate the dependency, the hierarchy of different private keys. Some people are calling, like in Electrum or Sparrow, the wallet is actually the specific branch of keys and not the software. Some people are calling wallet the software that will manage the wallet. In Lightning, the concept of wallet is even more complex, and there was a very good article by Roy that basically for Lightning, probably the term wallet is even more confused. Shitcoiners and normies will call wallet the addresses on chain. So like from this wallet, this movement of money has happened. And people call wallet basically the custodial accounts on Coinbase. Send it to my Coinbase wallet. And now, with Wallet of Satoshi, something like a Coinbase account is actually shipped as a software wallet, which is just a remote to ask somebody else to run a wallet for you. So the point is, the question will be, it's not very easy, but it will be something like, what do you think, how do you think at the Bitcoin wallet, what should it do, in your opinion? Where do you set the limits? What would be your good and useful definition for a Bitcoin wallet? Yeah, you can still start from that.
No, it's a good point. You know, there's a lot of terminology in the Bitcoin space these days that has a definition that is incredibly broad and kind of makes the term almost useless, to your point, that there's no understanding of what a wallet is because the term just means everything now. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, what users call wallets is kind of what matters here, and it's really like their interface to Bitcoin, right? Like the thing that underpins all of that is like the user views the wallet as the thing through which they get Bitcoin and the thing through which they hold Bitcoin and send Bitcoin and receive Bitcoin and whatever it is. So I think it's still kind of useful in that terminology, is like the user understands that like there is a thing through which they access Bitcoin and that is their wallet. And so that's, you know, I would just say that that's that's what a wallet is. It's just the thing through which you access Bitcoin.
First interface, like the browser for the internet, the
Yeah,
entry point for the final user.
The user understands what an app is, they understand what a website is, they understand what a hardware wallet is, and so to them that's just their interface. That's their interface to Bitcoin.
That's good. And so I stay with you just for a second. LDK in this case is just, in theory, just one small part of what a wallet should include, because you're basically managing the Lightning experience. But then in this version of the definition, the same wallet could actually tackle also maybe some e-cash credit or some external hardware signer, or a lot of complexity which goes beyond the Lightning interaction.
Oh yeah, I mean, the future of Bitcoin wallets is absolutely multi-protocol, right? So we see the early innings of this now. I think Mutiny is kind of the first to get there, but certainly all the wallets are going to end up there, where you start your wallet, you receive your first few Satoshis, and it's eCash, it's Fedimint, it's Cashew, whatever it is. And then you get to your 10 millionth Satoshi, and your wallet opens in Lightning Channel, because that's starting to be real money. It's starting to be something that you might care about not having in a custodial platform. When it was only worth a few dollars, maybe that's fine to be custodial, but now it's starting to be real money. Let's open a Lightning Channel. Let's take some real custody over this. And then you get to your 10th Bitcoin, and now we're talking about really real money. Now we don't want the Lightning Trust model. We don't want to have to be online once a month to make sure we don't get our money stolen. So now maybe we're looking at a multisig. Maybe we're looking at taking it fully on-chain. And so that's where these wallets are kind of going, is like there's a lot of complexity to it. And so in order for that vision to become real, no wallet is ever going to implement all of that. Right? No individual software engineer or individual team is ever going to implement Fedimint and Lightning and on-chain and the UI on top of that and make that seamless. Like that's not even remotely realistic. So that's where projects like LDK comes in. That's where projects like Greenlight and Breeze SDK come in. That's where project like BreeDK comes in. And Fedimint also has a library, and I think Cashew is working on that, or maybe there too. So now a team like Mutiny can, I think they're 3 people, they're a smallish team, and they can take LDK and they can say, all right, we're going to use LDK for all the Lightning pieces, and LDK is going to handle all that complexity for us, and we just kind of have to wire it up to our UI, and we got to wire it up to our LSP, and then we're done. And then we take Fedimint and we integrate the library there, and we wire that up to our UI, and we wire that up to LDK, and we wire it up to where it needs to be, and then we're done there. And then we use BDK, and we wire that up to, or we use that, and we point it to an Electrum server, and now we're syncing on chain, and we're hooking that up to LDK, and we're hooking that up to our, we're using that to derive keys, and we're using that for our on-chain. And then that frees people like Mutiny up to just focus on the UI, and they just build the UX they want to build. They add the cool new features they want to add, and they can focus on making that all robust and making that seamless without having to worry about all those layers of complexity below. But at the end of the day, the thing that the user thinks is their wallet and the thing that is the wallet is just Mutiny, right? So Mutiny is ultimately responsible for that user experience. They're the wallet. They're the interface through which the user can send and receive Bitcoin, can hold Bitcoin, and the user doesn't have to care about what is their Bitcoin. Where is that Bitcoin? Is it in a mint? Is it in Lightning? Is it on chain? Whatever it is, the wallet can handle that for them.
Abstraction.
Right.
So they just know it's money, and they just know that they want as much security as the amount of money requires.
Right.
Okay.
And the hard part about all that is communicating to the user what's going on, right? Because you don't want people to think that Mutiny is the same as Coinbase. Right? We don't want users to end up fooled into thinking that. We want them to understand that, like, no, if you want to hold 10 Bitcoin, you need to go find a multisig wallet. You need to go find these wallets that are really focused on that. And if you want to hold, 100 sats, you have to be custodial. There's no world in which that is ever going to be on-chain.
That's interesting, because it seems like the obvious metric is amount of sats, whose purchasing power also oscillates a lot, so it's also not simple, but there are other parameters. For example, regardless of the amount, if you are on-chain, if you are online very often, or if you want to retreat into the Himalaya for 7 years, your choice of security has to change. And if you are Julian Assange versus average Joe, your security model is very different. Anand, you started with an application called Wallet, Extra Wallet, that had the ambition to have a lot of these things wired together. Now the application is named Keeper, which is a more specific kind of focus. So what is a Bitcoin wallet for you? Is still a generic interface, or you're thinking more about heavy security? How do you interpret the word?
So I'll start with a different place, and then I'll come back to this. The reason being that we do talk to a lot of users in Keeper and the wallet space. We do talk to a lot of users, and one of the research we did with users is when they are interacting with a piece of hardware wallet or signing device, what do they really want to call it, right? Because it boils down to what do they associate it with. So there were options around, do you want to call it, would it make more sense to call it a key? Would it make more sense to call it a signing device or a signer or a hardware wallet and so on? So traditionally, it has been called a hardware wallet, but that's not semantically correct because it is a signer, and as developers or as technologists, we want to call it what it is. But what we realized talking to the users, and lots of them, there's a research on a small piece of research we did on that, is that people, the language is quite flexible. People do understand what it is based on the context. So you don't have to, it's not that you're coding for a machine that you have to tell it what specifically it is. People are way more intelligent. So what we realized is that in our communication, we might want to call it a signing device or whatever, but using simpler terms like key is much easier for users to understand. So when we come back to this point, I would quite agree with Matt. Basically, it's just the front end, whatever the user wants to use to interact with their sats, that is a wallet. Now, users also very easily understand that wallet can be a browser-based wallet, it can be an app, it can be a hardware wallet, it can perform different functions, it doesn't have to all be the same. There can be a hardware wallet which doesn't do entropy generation. There can be a hardware wallet which does entropy generation but doesn't do storage, like seed signer. So people do understand that, but it is important to keep it consistent in terms of the terms that we use. So wallet has been the term that it's basically the interface that people use to interact with this. That's the easy definition.
Alekos, you're promoting Portal mostly as a hardware wallet, if I'm correct. You don't use a lot as the term signing device. And there was a lot of, especially MVK, a lot of people were pushing for signing device, not just for a technical precision matter, but also because it may have different kind of legal implication even, because if you have a wallet, people that want your money, so basically street smugglers or nation states, they will call it a wallet, so that's where the money is. There may be regulatory implications. While a signing device is just a pen, there's no money in it. You are just using it to sign. It's a different mindset. Did you think about the terminology and just decided to go with the old term, or you're just not overthinking as much as I and Rodolfo do?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that. No, I haven't really thought about it. I call it an hardware wallet just because historically that's what people call these kind of devices, and I think it's easier to say, oh, I'm making an hardware wallet, so people will associate it with, I don't know, Ledger, Trezor, so they know the functionality of the device, and then I say, yeah, but it's for mobile. So that's, I think, the easiest way to convey what I'm building, I guess. I agree that it's technically not the best term, but in general, I try not to spend too much time on the philosophy behind it. We have had this discussion many times, so I try, they're very interesting, but I try not to get stuck in these rabbit holes and discussions on Twitter and whatever, so I guess my interest is just letting people understand what I'm building, and I think right now, hardware wallet is probably the best term. Maybe if, as a community, kind of we shift toward hardware signer, then I'm also going to start saying hardware signer. And I think hardware signer would be the most correct term. And in terms of wallet, I think I agree with them. So for me, the wallet is the interface. So whether it's custodian or not, you can add the adjective. So you can say this is a custodian wallet or a non-custodian wallet or unhosted wallet or whatever. But a wallet is like the interface that the user has to interact with Bitcoin. So to create transaction, to send money, to receive money. that's all. These are all wallets for me.
Well, it's interesting also because in a wallet, yes, there is money, but actually you also have your driving license, you have your, maybe you have the, I mean, there are other things in a wallet, right? Maybe you also have like personal memories. So maybe it's a more broad metaphor that we gave him credit for. Christian, your take on wallet as a term, but also let's go more specific about the interaction between Lightning and on-chain hardware stuff. For example, something that was discussed a lot, I remember in Lisbon, 2018, building on Bitcoin, and then it got a little bit lost, hardware wallets for Lightning, or in that case, more properly, HSM for Lightning. You work in Blockstream, you are running a Lightning project, but the company is also running an HSM network with Liquid, basically. So what's your take in interaction between hardware and Lightning in the future? Do you think that we will have something like that, or there will be worlds that will just be apart at the extremes?
Oh, I absolutely think that we will see a mix of hardware wallets and Lightning. I mean, that's how we secure stuff, right? It's also one of the aspects that got me very excited about this entire project, because one of the parts that we needed to do to get this non-custodial nature for Greenlight was exactly to pull apart some parts that have always been in the same piece of software, maybe in the same piece of hardware. So what we did is really we have the node online, but the signer is on the user's device. So which part is now the wallet, right? We may call sort of the metadata management on the node the wallet, or we might call the key management on the user side the wallet, or we might call the entire thing a wallet, right? Do we need to dive into do we need to resolve this abstraction at all? And yes, I will bite for the philosophical discussion. Because,
thank you, at least you.
Because after all, I mean, languages are a living thing, right? And while we as engineers often look for exact and precise definitions, there is no authoritative instance that could give us such a definition. And as such, I think we always need to make sure that the audience that we're talking to is at the same level of understanding of what we're trying to communicate, because after all, we use words to communicate, right? And so depending on what level of technical understanding and what level of detail I need to communicate, I will call some things wallet, and sometimes I will call them signer. Because depending on the level of detail they are interested in, that is the level that I have to also talk. And so for many people, I think the wallet being the interface, no matter how distributed it is, of how many components it consists, of how many layers of libraries it consists, I think that is what eventually will be known as wallets everywhere. And at some point, the Merriam-Webster dictionary will pick it up, and then it's sort of set in stone. But yeah, I don't think that there is one thing that this technical precision that we strive for may not be needed and may not even be possible in this sense.
Okay, I give up on terminology. Let's talk about compatibility. For example, in Matt's vision, you have different developers developing mostly libraries, and the wallet producer focusing on the global experience and abstraction, regardless of the library. So the interesting thing would be, what is the level of interoperability across these abstractions? For example, to Matt, I will want to ask how many wallets right now are based on LDK, and how many wallets, for example, you mentioned Mutiny, but it will also, I think that Blue Wallet, maybe, but I don't want to steal you the answer. Maybe you can list the wallets that are using LDK. And it will also interesting to understand how many wallets could use LDK together with something different. For example, and then Christian, maybe how many wallets are using Greenlight? Probably just Green and Breeze. But could there be a universe where it makes sense to actually mix them, use both, interoperate with both? Like, Mutiny is a case of LDK plus Fedimint. And Mercury is a case of Mercury layer plus Lightning. I don't know what they use for Lightning. That's a good question. So yeah, what are your wallet support status? Who are using your projects right now?
So LDK has a bunch of, like I mentioned, LDK has a wide range of different kinds of users. So we have Cash App on one end, on the large custodial nodes, all the way down to Mutiny, like you mentioned. There's also Lightspark doing more interesting, more custom stuff to service third parties. Actually, a model that looks relatively similar to Greenlight that they've built out to service now Coinbase that they just announced, as well as using some other Lightning nodes internally for their use. And then we have a bunch of nodes or a bunch of wallets that are coming out more immediately using LDK nodes. So I mentioned the LDK node project that's much easier to use, that's fairly new. So we have a number of wallets that I probably shouldn't, I don't know how many of them are public or which ones aren't. I don't actually track it very well. But I don't think there's any that are in production with it yet. Again, because it's only been out for the last few months, and the LSP integration for it has only been in alpha as of like a month ago. So that's coming along really well, but we're not quite there yet. So hopefully in the next 3 months we'll see a lot of them. So yeah, I mean LDK has not gotten a ton of wallets out there quite yet, but LDK nodes move the needle on that a lot. As to your kind of second question about interoperability, well, we have to define what interoperability means. So I think some people think like from the on-chain world where you can like import a key from another wallet. So like you created a wallet on you created an HD key on one wallet and then you can like import it into your other wallet. I don't think that's a world we're really going to get to with Lightning. So I know Breeze has tried to do some of this stuff with the Breeze SDK where you might be able to move a wallet from one app to another, or even give another app entire access to your wallet. So you can like have another app that can also use all of your money or take all of your money if it wants to.
That's what we do now.
Yeah. Right, which is how like on-chain stuff, people try to move, they import their key and give another wallet all of their money. But that's also not, I think that's a world we shouldn't, that's a bad thing, right? Like at the end of the day, users, certainly it's the case that users shouldn't be taking their private key data and putting it in 5 wallets, right? That's just gonna mean somebody's eventually gonna take your money. Users do like to sometimes migrate wallets, but honestly, I don't even think that's like super common. Like it's not really all that common that a user creates a wallet in one app and then decides like, I don't like this one, I'm going to move to another one. And it's not even super broadly supported.
It's interesting to avoid a lock-in problem. Like if your wallet, I know it's open source, so the code will never go away, but if you stop supporting everything completely, let's say that Breeze disappears, and now I could, in theory, just get the repository, compile my Breeze, and get my keys. But if I can have some kind of interoperability, maybe that can help.
It is, and I haven't done any UX research on this, so I don't know if anyone else has, but I would be astounded to learn that the response to that from most users is to import their key and not just send their money. I think users have a very intuitive understanding of like, oh, I want to move to a new wallet, let me just send all my money. They have a much less intuitive understanding of like, oh, well, let me see if I can go in settings and like export my seed phrase, and then like, let me see if my new wallet can import that seed phrase, because most wallets have a different HD path, right? They have a different way they derive the keys for payments from the root key. So in general, they're not actually compatible. There's just some wallets that happen to support a broader range of different derivation paths and key formats. So it's not super well supported to begin with, and then I think users just have a more intuitive understanding of like, I just need to send my money over there because that's my new wallet.
I will ask Anant about this because you tweeted recently about an abstraction, but first, before that, Christian, how many wallets are supporting right now Greenlight or are thinking about supporting it, and thoughts about interoperability, including the key recovery interoperability?
Oh, I think we do have quite different views on how that will work out, and so it's going to be an interesting future, I guess. So as for applications, I know of 12 at least, and there are a couple more that sometimes show up.
The meme that there's dozens of us, dozens.
There's dozens of us, yes. Among them, of course, the big names like Green, Breeze, Relay, Sphinx, and so on. Huh? Officially, Relay is in production.
Yes, Relay is in production.
So that's yeah. There's one in production. We managed to onboard 100,000 users in 24 hours, which I found quite impressive. That's like 10 times the current network size. Yeah, there are a couple of wallets that I can't talk about, of course, and then there is this whole cloud of people that sort of self-serve, because we give out certificates and we give access in a very permissionless way, and we don't ask for much in return, as it should be, I think. So that is rather nice to see also the adoption working out in the end. As for, so our goal is essentially to enable anybody to build a Lightning wallet in a secure manner, and they don't actually need to have much knowledge about the intricacies of Lightning itself, right? So hence why it is a service and not a library. And the other reason is exactly what Matt was saying, that the portability of your funds, the portability of your liquidity is key to what we want to do. What I saw quite a few times, and I do app hop quite a lot. So it was very annoying to me to essentially have an app, and then there's this cool new thing that I'd like to try out, and but before I can get to it, I need to tear down my channels, I have to move my funds over, and then I need to reestablish only to find out, oh no, it's not working. That's kind of annoying. Also, if you have multiple apps, all of a sudden you have to split your funds across all of them, right? You have $100, but 10 here, 90 here, and you want to pay 91, you can't. So that's a really, really bad user experience. So what we came up with is essentially a way to share the one Lightning node instance in the cloud, have as many signers attached as you want. So the node is functional as long as one signer is attached. So you're actually encouraged to have multiple apps attached to it. And the front ends all communicate with that one node. So all of a sudden I can have a chat app talk to this. I can have my wallet that I use for my day-to-day expenses there. I can have my Nostr wallet there to zap whenever I want. And it's not like we want people to enter their seed phrase, right? That is something that is, I think, very, very dangerous. You do not want users to teach users to enter seed phrases willy-nilly, because once you do that, well, it's very easy to phish them. So what we did is come up with a pairing scheme that allows the wallets on your phone and on your desktop to run in a keyless mode. So there is no signer attached at all. All they get is a TLS certificate to talk to the node, and a bearer token that tells you, oh, this guy, by the way, has access only to the funds in this channel, or only on the 27th of February, this guy can do a payment of $10. We can probably work on granularity as much as we want, but you don't get root access essentially to the funds just by pairing your application with the node. And by doing so, we can come up with very, very interesting setups, right? So you could, for example, have a dedicated point of sale application that can only create invoices, whereas the back office can send and receive, or an auditor gets read-only access, right? So you need your taxes to be done, give a read-only access to your node, and it will automatically be tracked in the background. And so that's the vision I have for Lightning, is exactly the possibility of essentially having small dedicated things, maybe a channel management app, maybe a chat app, maybe a Nostr app, maybe a wallet, whatever that might be, and all of them interoperate. and the ability to delegate access as well. I might want to give my children an allowance, for example. Well, they can dip into my balance, but only as much as I give them, for example. And these settings, the flexibility of the structure is what is very interesting to me as well, because it means we can come up with new experimental stuff. We can try out new stuff very quickly. You don't have to dedicate a whole day just to try out a new app. You pair it, it doesn't work, throw it away. You didn't lose any time or any money with that. So I think that is very much the core experience that I want users to have. And if that experience is good enough, then they will invest the time to upgrade their experience and eventually take their node, offboard it off of Greenlight, and run it on their infrastructure as fully educated and capable, experienced node operators, which is what we want everybody to be in the end, right?
Potentially. Yeah, sure.
So one, I share this vision. I think this is great. Like if we can give apps. So I would use different terminology. If we can give apps selective access to your wallet, right? Because I obviously don't want my chat app to have access to all my funds, so I would not call that my wallet anymore. But one problem with this is we now have at least 3 or 4 protocols to do this. And so we're a long ways from getting to a point where this is actually going to be useful, right? So it's well, if your wallet happens to be Greenlight based, then the app has to integrate the Greenlight API, and then it works. Then there's a bunch of wallets now have Nostr Wallet Connect, right? So that's become fairly popular. It's a more open protocol. There's also, of course, LND has their macaroon system. So if you happen to have an LND node either at home or maybe if you have Zeus on your phone, you have a protocol for that. So you can generate the same kind of tokens and give someone access to your LND node. I think Core Lightning, in fact, has a separate protocol for it that goes over messages of 3 protocols. Okay.
We have 3 of them.
So Core Lightning has a few different options if you want to do it. So I think one risk we have with going down this path is we need to figure out what we want to standardize on, because we're already in a really bad state around fragmentation there, and that's a protocol that I think should exist. We strongly agree that this is something that should exist. But then what does it look like, and what does it look like to standardize this? And is Nostr Wallet Connect is kind of the only, I would say, open standard for it, the only one that's designed to support any wallet. But it's do we want to standardize around Nostr as the communication layer? Is that the right platform? If you have one app on your phone talking to your wallet on your phone in another app, do you really want to route that all the way through Nostr just to come back to your phone and then hope that you have a Nostr thing that can send you a notification? Probably not the right platform for that.
You're not running a relay on your phone?
Yeah, sorry. So this is probably not the right place. So what does this look like as a standard that every wallet can integrate with and supports everyone? Is something that I don't think anyone's working on aside from Nostr Wallet Connect, but it's very Nostr tied, and do we want that? Is that the right platform for all Bitcoin wallets? So that's something that if someone has free time and is an engineer, I don't know of a Bitcoin engineer with free time, but if one does exist, this would be a great project that someone should try to think about, and then kind of try to talk to a bunch of wallets and see if we can get kind of some standard to emerge so that it can be truly open.
So having been in this space for a while now, I observe that there seems to be a sort of breathing motion, right? We sort of go off in 1,000 different directions, and we diverge into different options, and we start experimenting, and everybody gets excited about the new capabilities of this and this and this. And then at some point we sit down at a table like 2016 in Milan when we first had the Lightning Spec meeting. We had 4 implementations that came out from somewhere, and we then took the
even more, because there was even Bitfury with a very small implementation, right? Amico Pay, and there was a lot of stuff at the beginning.
So I wouldn't say that artificially coming up with a new standard is what we need, because that's
Matt is saying is that we have 46 competing standards and we need to find an interoperability one. And
exactly.
Maybe I've just already heard about this situation.
So we should probably wait and see and objectively evaluate each of them for their pros and for their cons, right? We tend to only talk about the pros, but every proposal has their cons. And so I think time will tell us what is the solution that works for users, works for us, and essentially has the least downsides and the most upsides. So I'm quite happy to see $1,000 boom at the moment.
Anand, basically, Christian was saying, we don't want users to basically import seeds everywhere because that's dangerous for phishing. And Matt was saying, probably you will not import, you will just send money through one app to the others. But you recently tweeted something that seems to go in the opposite direction, because you say that basically the abstraction that you seems like that for you works better for users is to think about the 12 words, so B39 basically as the Bitcoin, and as the apps as just something commodity you can put on top of them. So giving the users the opposite impression in a way, which may be complex, but you think it works better in terms of abstraction, which is also, you were coming from, yesterday there was like Elysium proposing this keyless, this mysterious new keyless solution. You were also coming from a social recovery keyless idea, and now you're basically a BIP39 maximalist.
Yeah,
Tell us more.
So yeah, it's an interesting story, and I'll try to not take the whole time. But basically, interoperability is a single word, but it can mean a lot of things. And it is a pet peeve of mine that a lot of times, you come up with user ID. Lightspark has its own user ID. Nostr has its own NPub, and things go in a different direction, and people invest in it so much, then they don't necessarily come back. So we do need some kind of, okay, you should experiment, but people talking to each other would increase, this interoperability. And interoperability can be many things. If you look at just the asset side of things, being able to send my sats from one wallet to another is a kind of interoperability, right? But when you introduce Lightning and then eCash, that interoperability might go away. Then the second level of interoperability is being able to talk to each other. For example, that the labels that you use for your transactions, can that be brought from one to another, right? Now, obviously the mechanism or the semantics I'm talking about are more on-chain, but that kind of applies to Lightning as well, most probably. And when it comes to seed words or interoperability at an entropy level, there are two things here, I would say. That it is not about people do that very often. It is more about that they know they can do it. And how I learned this the hard way is that initially when we were focusing on keyless, and we spent probably a year on that, on keyless social recovery, what we realized is, and the code was open source, so we were out there, look at our code, it's open, this is how you do it, and there were lots of blogs and a lot of sessions we did. But people don't really look through the code, though it is open source. What they want to do is not take your word for it, right? Try it somewhere else out. Now, with the scheme that we had with shared secret sharing and keyless things, they were not able to try it somewhere else out. So they had to take our word for it. When it is something they can do, they may not do it very often, but if they can do, then that, they get a lot more confidence. I don't have to trust the single wallet provider. So that gives them a lot more confidence. Even now, the way users use our wallet, they download Keeper. They will say, oh, Keeper, let me put some, $20 in it. Let me try putting this seed somewhere else. Oh, yeah, it works. They are like a, standard-based wallet. Now I'm going to recreate a Keeper wallet, and now I'm going to put, 1 Bitcoin on it or 2 Bitcoin on it. So that's one way people use the interoperability of seeds. And the second thing, if you look at multisig, if it's a 3 or 5 multisig, you want to rotate out one key because, it has, or, Ledger has launched something which you didn't like, or a vulnerability has been exposed. You just want to swap out the one key, right? So that's called key rotation. Now, when you do key rotation, you don't really need to type in the seed words. You just need the XPub and 3 of the hardware wallets to sign. Now, in that case, you are actually, just imagine if these were not interoperable. I'm actually stuck with those 5 keys. And I'll have to change everything over. Here, you have much more flexibility to move things around. So interoperability, able to, wallets being able to talk to each other, apps or libraries being able to talk to each other, just gives us a way more flexibility. And you never know, people come up with intelligent solutions which, you know, we on this forum might not be able to think of. But if they're interoperable, they don't have to think about that part, and then they can build on top of that. Otherwise, they'll have to think in silos. So I'm I'm a maximalist in terms of thinking about interoperability and how wallets and apps can use the same core features and build on top of that. So that's where I will come from.
So importing may not be encouraged or even easy to do, but it should be possible just to show that you can recover your fund.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Alekos, your take on interoperability in general, but more specifically, getting back to the first question about what is supporting your project, how many wallets can use your portal device, and are you thinking about creating your own wallet or not? And in that case, what is your take on interoperability?
Yeah, so what I wanted to add, maybe I'm going to start from my own thought. I wanted to add something to the interoperability discussion, speaking about developer tools interoperability. So the fact that at least it looks like we can agree on something which is using Rust. So most projects, as far as I know, are most of the notable projects on Bitcoin of libraries like LDK, BDK, Greenlight is in Rust as well, right? So at least we can agree on the language. That's a good starting point. And yeah, I also use Rust for, so tying to your question, for Portal for my device, I'm developing an SDK, which I'm giving out to wallets like Keeper, for example. So with this SDK, the developer can just pretty much very easily integrate the device. They don't need to figure out all the complexities of encryption, fragmentation, communication with the device, etc. And my SDK is also written in Rust. So I'm part of that kind of Rust Bitcoin ecosystem as well. In terms of interoperability in general, I think I agree that moving seeds around is generally not a good idea because you're exposing your private keys to more and more risk of getting leaked by, like maybe you've been using an app which luckily doesn't have any vulnerabilities, you move them into another app which accidentally has a vulnerability, and now all your funds from your previous app are screwed. So the more apps you pile on, the more you increase your chance of getting hacked. This is kind of mitigated by hardware wallets, I guess, or hardware signers, because you're just sharing the XPub. So it's more of a privacy concern. You can, if you have an hardware wallet, you can export the XPub and use it with an app, and then you don't like it and you just move to another app, and at least you're not exposing the key material. So that's, I guess, a mitigation that I think that would be reasonable, kind of moving around like that. So if you have an hardware wallet, I think it's reasonable to just install another app and keep using the same hardware wallet with another app. I wouldn't do that with a seed. I wouldn't move around seeds. I would probably move the funds to the new wallet. So yeah, I don't remember the question. Was it just this? Was something else?
It's just interoperability. But Christian wants to close the panel basically because we're over, right? So Christian, bring it on.
I feel very philosophical today.
Great.
I think when talking about interoperability and compatibility, that is very much a luxury problem, right? That comes with the need for it comes with maturity. That means that you made it a certain way, and so for interoperability to become a thing, you actually have to have an experimental phase before, and you have to have weeded out all of the bad options. So now you know that yes, we concentrate on this one option, and I think that oftentimes we try to push too hard for interoperability early on, and then sort of lose interest towards the end. But I also think that it is in the hands of engineers of not creating too many possibilities for incompatibilities, right? I know as
meta interoperability, basically.
As an engineer, I'm very tempted to give users every single possible option, and of course they will make use of that. And coming back to your example of HD key derivation, well, those paths are all different because, well, somebody added that flexibility into it. Why? Well, somebody came up with some obscure reason for it, but now we're in a situation where that everybody has different derivation paths. So as engineers, we probably need to be a bit more opinionated and not defer choices too much to users, because we are the ones that have the details, so we should have an opinion and we should make an informed decision, because others probably won't make an as informed decision. But also So that prepares the ground for later interoperability, later compatibility, and avoids incompatibilities early on.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you guys. Good job, Giacomo. Thank you guys. So we have one final act, and that will be all for today. Before we go, after the next speech, it's not gonna be a panel, it's gonna be a speech. We're gonna have lunch at 1 p.m. served in the dining room, and we have 2 hours, guys, to stuff our bellies, because at 3 p.m. sharp, buses will be in front of the venue to take us to the quarries of Carrara. So be punctual, don't miss your bus. Before we keep going with the next speech, let me please thank Fulgur'Ventur for organizing this beautiful event. Vitali, Oleg, thank you so much for having us. The amount of talent that gathers at Principino Eventi for Tuscany Lightning Summit is astonishing. So I'm very honored to be part of this. All right, Peter, it's up to you. So the next speaker is already on stage. The speech is going to be about layer 2s and covenants. So please, let's give a big round of applause to Peter Tong. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, so this title suggests Covenant-Dependent Layer 2 Systems Review. Where this kind of all came from is Fulgur'Ventur has asked me to go and do essentially a comparison paper looking at the covenant-dependent Layer 2 systems out there, and how they kind of compare, and also try to get a sense of like where Bitcoin can go forward. What are the options for getting these things deployed and so on. But, if I'm going to be looking at this stuff, really, you got to go start with, well, what are we actually talking about? What makes a layer 2 a layer 2? And, I think the term layer 2 is used for a lot of things, but not necessarily correctly. And I wanted to kind of have a definition of it that was, what made some sense and actually like put things into a category. And with regard to that, well, of course, we can start off with, well, what is a layer 1? And my definition of layer 1 is really about, you're transacting with the sort of passive security provided by the chain itself. Of course, Bitcoin is the layer 1, but I would consider things like RGB to be layer 1s. Merge mining is another example of layer 1, because ultimately they all go back to the chain itself. That's where the security really comes from. And, when you think of passive security, I have some RGB assets on my phone from, 2 years ago when they were first done in Switzerland, when the conferences gave out some RGB assets. And the security of those RGB assets comes down to Bitcoin. I do not need to turn on my phone to make those assets secure. There's no third party who can take them away. And that's very unlike layer 2 systems. So I'd say layer 2 systems, really where the transaction model comes from is it's a combination of conglomeration, taking many transactions and only ever putting one or at least a small number of transactions on chain, and then also being able to react. And the combination of the two isn't necessarily always there. CLTV payment channels is an interesting example. This is sort of a pre-Lightning concept where you could have a payment channel that could send money in one direction. And the funny thing about CLTV is because you're giving your counterparty an option to take more and more money out of the shared pot, you don't actually have to go react to them, because there's no reason for them to, there's no reason for them to do anything but just take the most amount they can. But in that case, it does fit a conglomeration thing. But anytime you want to have a bidirectional channel where money can go in one direction and then flow in the other, that means you had a state in the past where the counterparty could have taken more money than they currently own. Thus, you must be able to react to that in some way. the counterparty has been put in a position where doing the bad thing ends up having a response to it. And, from a more maybe like end user point of view, I think, you could say that in L2 you need to be able to unilaterally withdraw, or you need to be able to prevent the counterparty from benefiting from fraud. And an interesting example of this, which I think is maybe a bit underappreciated, is Lightning HTLCs. Now, to recall, an HTLC is a hashed, time-locked contract where effectively you have an output that can be redeemed by either proving knowledge of a hash preimage or through a timeout mechanism. And Lightning layers on top of this a punishment mechanism for putting on-chain states that are revoked. But that's kind of your main output, the main possibilities. But the thing with HTLCs is Lightning is used for very small payments. You can easily send 1 Satoshi in a Lightning payment. So if an HTLC is like this TX out that has some possibilities, how does it actually happen? Well, in fact, Lightning does not use HTLCs for extremely small payments. What Lightning actually does for extremely small payments is just says, well, we'll take the HTLC value that can't really be represented on chain, and we'll just make a channel state where that money goes off to fees. And then once the two sides have negotiated, you get another channel state where the balance is updated. Now, does this meet our criteria of preventing the counterparty from benefiting from fraud? Well, yes. Are you really going to make money as a Lightning channel operator by trying to go steal 1 sat from your counterparty? It doesn't make any sense. So in that sense, even for these small values, we are preventing the counterparty from benefiting from fraud, even though there isn't actually a unilateral withdrawal case there. There isn't actually a way to make this go on chain. And this will be important later when we start discussing some of the trade-offs for these systems. All right, so what are not L2 systems? Well, I think a lot of people go call some of these systems L2, and I will disagree. Liquid I will not categorize as an L2 system because it is custodial. Liquid is essentially a big multi-party bank. All your money is held by some entity, and there is no option for unilateral withdrawal. There's no direct way in the protocol to prevent the counterparty from benefiting from fraud. Cashew is another example. Well, it's very clever. Again, it's ultimately custodial. And, state chains was another one that I kind of ran into, talking to Fulgur and so on about how we would go do this paper. In reading more about it, I realized state chain is an example where at any moment, assuming the state chain operator has been behaving honestly, they cannot commit fraud. But they can do dishonest things which allow them to commit fraud. And there's a subtle nuance there that's relevant to legalities and so on, but I'm not going to call it an L2 under my definition because it doesn't have this trustless property, or at least trust minimized property. Finally, for our last section of definitions, all right, well, what do we mean by covenants? Well, this is sort of the general category of restrictions on what transactions can spend and output. Now, an interesting thing about covenants is that Lightning, current production Lightning, does actually use them in a limited way, and it uses them through pre-signed transactions. So if you and I have a Lightning channel, there's some edge cases around revoked states and HTLCs, which, long story short, is the way we deal with this is we jointly agree to sign a transaction that spends an output, and because we will not agree to do something different in the circumstance where this part of the protocol matters, that's a covenant, right? We have already set up a way where this transaction output can only be spent in a certain way through a specific format of transaction. It happens to be a pre-signed transaction. It's kind of set in stone. But that kind of fits the definition of a covenant. And interestingly, this aspect of the protocol could have also been implemented with check template verify, among other things. Now, check template verify is probably the best known covenant thing, and that is a opcode, which essentially says, let's check if the transaction spending this output meets this kind of template with, you know, a set of known outputs and a set of kind of known input shapes and so on. It's a very restrictive, rigid thing. Ccash any prev out's a little weird because this, I think, shows how covenants can be kind of non-obvious. Now, the idea with Ccash any prev out is just a way of creating a signature that applies to any prev out with a particular pub key in it. But you can use this as a covenant through a bit of script manipulation magic by figuring out what signature would go and sign for the transaction you're going to go and spend this in, and then hard coding that in the script. You know, I won't get into full details, but funny enough, you know, this thing that didn't obviously look like covenant can be used for that. Of course, concatenation, concatenating two strings together. Well, because it lets you build up things, you can basically use this covenants in all kinds of weird ways. And finally, the last category of sort of covenants is there's a whole slew of opcodes people have proposed that, you know, do things with trees of transactions and so on. And we'll explain more why this is being proposed later. But, you know, opovict is an actual one, and God, there's so many different names of like leaf something, tap magic, whatever. It just goes on and on and on. There's like an endless category of them. But, you know, that's kind of the general shape you have for what kind of covenants could be added to Bitcoin. And finally, while writing this write-up, I kind of had a bit of a detour going and, you know, sort of doing the background research and realizing like mempools are kind of a mess right now. And there's a lot of things that are wrong with how mempools work from a point of view of L2 systems. As an example, transaction cycling was an attack that was discovered, or at least I should say was published while I was kind of working on all this stuff. I personally proposed a fix to this, yet another opcode, opexpire, you know, which has some relevance. Transaction pinning has been a long-standing issue, and to recap, basically transaction pinning is ultimately really an economic attack on miners because it's a series of techniques that allow a malicious party to make it difficult to replace a transaction. In, you know, a very simple example where this can be relevant is a coin join, right? You can imagine all 100 of us in this room are doing a coin join, and one bad actor wants to go just screw up that whole process and just hold our coins hostage for a while. Well, if they go and, at least with current Bitcoin Core rules, if they go double spend that coin join with a big transaction at low fee rate and high absolute fee, we can be in a position where the coin join that we all really want to happen can't replace this very undesirable transaction because the absolute fee is less. And, you know, I won't get into too many details there, but like you can imagine this thing like Lightning, when you have multiple people trying to transact, this can cause problems. You know, you might have transactions that take too long to get mined and thus put parties into a position where they can't recover funds. And, you know, we've done a half-decent job of working around these issues, but when you're designing L2 systems, this stuff gets complex quickly. There's also issues around fee payment in general. I mean, we've probably all seen how fees shot up so much. Well, all these L2 systems, they tend to go have lots of transactions, often very hard-coded transactions, especially with covenants, where the form of the transaction is kind of fixed in advance. Well, how do you deal with different fee rates? I mean, who pays fees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? It's a complex thing. And a lot of the ways we've designed this stuff make out-of-band fee payments profitable. You know, if you have a transaction and you need to add a fee to it, doing that on-chain with child pays for parent adds bytes. Going and just paying a miner to go do it for you is cheaper, potentially. Well, the more we create these systems and more fees become relevant, the more we can get into a position where large miners are making money by accepting payments for fees that small miners realistically can't do. And that can be a real problem. There's also a bit of a detour around replaced by fee rate, which, long story short, is a potential way to go fix this transaction pinning problem by saying, well, why don't you just go and mine the transaction that's economically relevant and, you know, pays enough fees to get into the next block. And there's also issues around free relay DOS attacks, which is kind of a whole separate topic. But I think what I really want to get through here is there's a ton of stuff that needs to be done with mempools to figure out how do we support L2 systems better. And finally, all right, what is our motivation anyway? Why are we looking at all this Covenant stuff? Well, Lightning as it exists, one key problem it has is scaling. You do need basically one UTXO at least per user. And block size is limited, so the total number of UTXOs you could have is limited, thus the total number of people who could use Lightning directly is limited. And there's been all kinds of numbers bandied about, but basically if you want the entire world to use Lightning, it's not going to happen right now. You need some way to go share UTXOs. In share UTXOs, everything anyone has ever come up with uses something like Covenants in some way. There's also issues with Lightning around liquidity. How much money are you tying up in channels? In particular, how much money are you tying up for receive capacity? And also, finally, issues around interactivity. People want Lightning payments, people tapping offline. And some of the systems we'll look at try to go solve that. Also, Lightning is kind of constrained in how you do need to, or at least someone needs to, be able to go look at the chain once in a while and react to fraud. And speaking of fraud, well, one of the sort of long-standing L2 systems to improve on Lightning has been L2. And the idea of L2 is, now remember what I said about fraud earlier? Well, currently Lightning works basically a reactive punishment or justice transaction mechanism. You publish the wrong state to the chain, your counterparty can go and take the money that you had in that particular state. And L2 tries to simplify this by changing it from punishment to an updating mechanism, where effectively if you publish a state to the chain and it's not the most up-to-date state, your counterparty can publish an updated state to the chain that spends the output that you created and then reassigns that money to who should have it. And this process can go on in multiple steps. Now, L2 does need Sighash any prov out because you need some way of signing a state rather than a transaction hash. And whether or not we add Sighash any prov out has been something that's been debated for years. And currently there's kind of no consensus on doing it, but this is one of the options out there. Now, L2 by itself doesn't get any scaling. It potentially fixes interactivity, but that is all it does. However, when you're looking at how to fix scaling, L2 does relate to sort of a class of things I'm going to go call channel factories. And the idea here is really related to, I think, what ARC first called virtual UTXOs. It's this idea that you can be in a position with a counterparty where a UTXO could be created, but it doesn't have to unless people disagree. Now, simplest example of this is imagine if Alice, Bob, and Charlie want to open Lightning channels between each other. Well, one way they could do it, of course, is by creating multiple transaction outputs for each of these links. But the other way they could do it is say, well, hang on, why don't we get together, put all this money that's going to be used for channels into one UTXO that's locked by a 3 of 3 multi-sig, but could also be spent to a transaction that takes that money and splits it out into where the channels, the 3 different channels between the different combinations counterparties. And then we build the Lightning channel commitment transactions and all this other stuff on top of that. Now remember, Lightning is a reactive protocol. So if something goes wrong, this looks just like Lightning as it is, except you publish one more transaction to start the dispute process, if you will. You publish the first split transaction to the chain, and then you publish whatever other transactions you need on top of this. So this kind of system is very close to the Lightning protocol as we know it, but potentially, if Alice, Bob, and Charlie can agree on what state their channel's in and when they want to close and so on, potentially we can save money on fees. Because you can imagine, I mean, let's suppose these three parties eventually decide they don't need the channels anymore, and they want to close it. Well, they could collectively sign one transaction, spending that output, and doing whatever they need to do. You know, potentially that can go and save fees. And people proposed L2 in relation to this simply because it makes some of the failure cases simpler. But, you know, this could be potentially be used for Lightning in general. Now, what happens if you start adding more people to this? I mean, well, what if it's like Alice, Bob, Charlie, you know, David, Alyssa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? There is no limit how big a channel factory system could be. But if all you have to do it is just regular multi-sig and transactions, the chance of a failure resulting in a lot of data ending up on chain gets very high. You know, if you have 100 people in a channel factory, first of all, how did you coordinate opening in the first place? And secondly, how likely is it that at least one of those 100 is going to drop out, disagree, whatever? Well, that's where convenants kind of come in. And there's a lot of proposals around this. I do not have time to kind of go over a summary of all of them, but I think the thing I want to give an impression of is all these systems based around the idea that if you want to improve on that state, you have some kind of split mechanism where you say, rather than just having one transaction that's sort of your initial setup, you have a tree of, you either have a tree of transactions that sort of drill down into different possibilities of who had what money, or you have some kind of magic opcode, like op-evict or something, that has this concept of having a set of people involved in a channel in different ways to bring people in and out of that set. So a simple example is you can imagine having a channel factory that's set up with 100 different people, and one of that 100 people wants to get out of that. With sufficiently smart opcode, you could have a system where that one person who wants to get out of that set basically takes that 100 of 100 multisig and turns it into a 99 of 99 multisig, and then takes their balance out of that amount, and now they end up with their amount on chain and everyone else continues on in their own multisig. Yes, that's going to be a lot of complexity, but there have been a lot of schemes along these lines with different trade-offs. And an interesting thing about them from a point of view of like, can you actually implement this on Bitcoin, is when you look at things like opcat, which are really tools to just manipulate data in general, with sufficient scripting magic, all of these things can be implemented. You know, you might have very large scripts because you got to go put a ton of stuff on chain to work through all the programming data essentially that you're passing around, but it can be done, and at least it can be prototyped. There's also ways to do this with like trusted third parties and actually go handle, countersigning to kind of test out these ideas. But, this is kind of, I think, why there hasn't been much forward progress made on these things, because there's tons of little trade-offs. And, ultimately, there is a coordination issue with all this, where can you really be in a position to get, say, 100 people onboarded at once? Are you really in a position to get those people unboarded in a reasonable way? I mean, do you want to go have a future where so many people are sharing UTXOs, it's not really clear how do you get them out? We'll talk more about that possibility later, but that is the main category of systems that I've looked at. Now, going beyond, got my slides a bit wrong there, but yeah, there's an example in the diagrams for one of these advanced systems. It's complex, endless complexity. But, so the next thing I want to go talk about is ARC. And of the L2 systems out there, I think this is really the main other category. And frankly, as far as I can tell, ARC might be the first very different true L2 system that anyone's actually come up with other than Lightning. Certainly the one that maybe has most flexibility. And, well, how does ARC work? Again, this is about a virtual UTXO system. And ARC's concept is we have a coordinator who creates a pooled UTXO that can be split, if needed, into a large tree of virtual UTXOs. So in the failure case, where there's disagreements and something has to go on chain, or some kind of failure and something has to go on chain, you can create all of the UTXOs that are allocated to people by mining a whole big tree of transactions or part of a tree of transactions. Now, imagine if everyone in this room wanted to have one virtual UTXO. Well, you can imagine we can create one pool UTXO that can be assigned to everyone in this room, and thus you have the ability to get your share of that UTXO if needed. Of course, that's kind of useless by itself. So the other really clever thing ARC does is it says, well, how do I get rid of a virtual UTXO without it having to go on chain? And to fix this problem, ARC has the concept of having multiple pools, multiple pooled UTXOs and different rounds of them. And essentially, if you own one of these virtual UTXOs, you can trade it for a new virtual UTXO in a different round by signing a transaction in coordination with a coordinator such that your virtual UTXO can be spent only if a new virtual UTXO is created in a new round. And you can make these transactions link together with what ARC calls a connector. So you have an output for the new transaction that's spent by the transaction you've signed spending this virtual UTXO. And basically the coordinator is put in a position where if they want their money, they have to create this new pooled output. Thus, this previous transaction can be mined and they can collect. Now, that's all well and good, but that by itself, you would still have to go on chain for everything. So then ARC adds one more ingredient to all this, which is each pooled UTXO that contains the funds for all of these virtual UTXOs, it has an expiry time. And ARC suggests an expiry time of 4 weeks. So, if everyone with a virtual UTXO has gotten rid of their UTXO before the 4 weeks, the coordinator can just use the timeout, just take the entire value of it. And now they get all their money back without going on chain. In between those two things, you can have virtual UTXOs that you can trade trustlessly in that, if needed, could become real UTXOs. And that part's interesting because it also means you can do things like create lightning channels backed by virtual UTXOs that for the time period where they're valid at least, you can use like lightning channels because hypothetically, if it actually needs to go on chain, you could put on chain the different parts of the tree that end up creating that virtual UTXO. And finally, if you want this to be convenient, ARC at least suggests that you would create these pooled UTXOs, say every 5 seconds. That might be a little unrealistic, maybe, every few minutes. But between all those two, you have an interesting system. And notably, this is entirely unlike Lightning. For example, if I want to go and pay you with virtual UTXO, I can just arrange for one to be created for you and then give you the details to recover that if necessary. Now I have paid you, even though no money has gone on chain. And this is a cool system. There's been a lot of excitement around it. There's a lot of other neat things you can do with it that I haven't gone into. But, oh, there we go. But I think the key thing I want to go talk about with ARC is ARC seems to have a massive liquidity problem. And the reason is, to make all the system work, the problem is every time you give up a UTXO, the coordinator of these ARC pools has to go put up money. Right? They do not get to collect their money until that 4-week period is up. They have to go front the money for every single transaction that happens on ARC. But it gets worse, because if you own a ARC virtual UTXO, well, when the 4 weeks is up, the coordinator can just take it. You know, your money expires. And I suspect if ARC is ever actually implemented, it'll probably basically be a system where it reverts to custodial after 4 weeks. So, you know, you won't actually lose your money, but you certainly could. And thus, I would expect the average person on ARC to hopefully run their wallets frequently enough to go refresh everything, which means the total liquidity needed for ARC to work is the entire balance of everyone on an ARC system, plus whatever transactions they want to do on top of this. And, you know, just to give you an idea, I mean, let's assume for sake of arguments that the cost of capital is like 5% per year. Well, that is a cost that the coordinator is going to pass to you. That 5% per year is basically the cost that you have to go have money on ARC. And, you know, you got to wonder, I mean, if ARC is going to be the solution to, like, onboarding everyone in the world to Lightning, what's it going to look like when everyone with small balance is paying like 5% per year just to go hold a balance? I mean, I'm not sure how realistic this really is. But, you know, it is a possibility. A lot of people are excited about this. But frankly, myself, when I thought through how this liquidity problem works, I got a whole lot less excited. But we'll see. And finally, where is it? There you go. The other big thing I want to go talk about in terms of downsides of all these systems is scaling for the failure case. Now, it's all well and good that we can have, you know, 1,000 people sharing a UTXO, but how likely is it that something goes wrong and those UTXOs have to go on chain? It's hard to know. But certainly if it can happen, we could easily be in a position where we see fee rates go up enormously due to failures of big, for instance, ARC service providers or big LSPs or so on. And, you know, this may screw up the economics of these systems. Now, a counterpoint to that is, like I argued earlier when I was kind of defining what an L2 is, it would be reasonable to go and say that provided that the coordinator coordinating all this stuff can't profit from fraud, that may still be good enough. In the case of a system like ARC, you know, if things have to go on chain but can't because fees are high, maybe we can design a system where the coordinator is not going to actually profit from this. I mean, but, you know, there are limits to this. Certainly for ARC, if fees are so high that it's impossible to get UTXOs created at all, the coordinator could profit from it eventually by taking money out after this 4-week period expires. And depending on how much of the tree has been instantiated, you know, that may be profitable for them. And at that point, do we really have a trustless system? It's not really clear. But unfortunately, you know, these are kinds of trade-offs we have. And like, if we want to do better than Lightning, we are going to have to go start looking at this stuff. And you know, I would suggest that Bitcoin community not rush into this stuff too quickly, because, you know, even Lightning itself has this kind of failure case problem where if a bunch of Lightning channels have to go on chain, well, the amount of data involved putting them on chain is not trivial. You know, maybe if like Phoenix screws up and like every single Phoenix user goes on chain in a span of a week, you know, fees might spike. Maybe we'd find out the current systems don't work that well. But, you know, we kind of have to get more experience with this stuff. Which gets us to, well, what is the path forward? You know, do we adopt any covenants at all? I mean, do we adopt SIG-hash any provote, CTV, some fancy tree thing, opcat? Well, you know, with opcat as an example, a lot of people are very worried that opcat is just so general that it will let things happen on Bitcoin that we didn't actually intend to. I mean, even something simple like SIG-hash any provote. You know, when it was first proposed, people didn't realize it could be used for covenants, yet sure enough it can be. You know, CTV is another one of these examples where, well, you know, it seems to be very restricted in what it can do, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it lets you do things we don't want to be possible in Bitcoin. Also, CTV has problems with fee payments. I mean, CTV locks you into a model of transacting where every single time you need to go pay fees, realistically you got to do it in a second transaction. And that could put us in a position where miners can make a lot more money banding together to be big enough to accept out-of-band payments. That's kind of a big problem. And of course, with all these like fancy tree manipulation magic opcodes that do fancy things with trees for niche use cases, is this stuff actually going to pass the test of time? Will these fancy opcodes be actually used for things that actually get deployed and actually used? We could easily try to implement something like op-evict and find out that it never actually gets used, and we've just added a bunch of complexity to the Bitcoin code base without a benefit. And of course, nothing at all is an option. Arc is an interesting example of this, where for all the complexity of Arc, you can actually implement it today in a slightly different model where either you have a trusted third party who sort of emulates covenants, or you just rely on the people in a round agreeing with each other, and thus creating covenants through pre-signed transactions. So, maybe we go hold off on deploying this stuff for a while and get more experience. And with that, thank you.
Time for questions. I think no, because the bus is at 3. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. So it's a wrap. Keep in mind that 3 p.m. sharp buses are going to be in front of the venue to take us to the queries. Thank you so much for being here. Tonight, the carnivore dinner is fully booked. So either you booked already, or unfortunately there is no space for you guys. But at 10, drinks will be available at the bar with 25 euros. You're gonna have all the drinks you want for the entire evening. So in case you didn't book, just get drunk at the bar. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.